All right, welcome back. We are Game 1005 in the fall 2022 semester at George Brown, and it's week one, part two of our broadcast, and recording the cameras over there. And what we're going to be doing right now is talking about game production, an intro to game production. What is this thing that you've enrolled in the first place anyway? So I'm going to skip down to that part. Where last we left off, we talked about specialty roles and the project, but let's talk about game production and how it's changed over the last little while. I'm just going to go into casting mode here. So, there's been a lot of changes, right? 30 years ago, games were smaller. There were arcade games. You know, when I was playing games way back in the day, right, it was all vector graphics, right? That's how I started, right? Maybe some of you have played some of those games. And they're still out there today, right? And they're fun. They're smaller games, smaller teams, and a real short time frame. It wasn't the crunch that it is today. Think about the EAs that are out there today, Activisions, right? They keep on coming up with this massive games, or as part of this franchise every single year, and it keeps on repeating. I'm thinking about things like Call of Duty, right? They keep on coming up with a new Call of Duty game every single year, and if they make 500 million, it's not enough. Not enough. They get mad at people, right, if they don't make 500 million. That's the industry we're in right now. And we need to be organized in this kind of industry. There's a lot of larger teams right now. There are some indie studios, but the larger teams that we know of, the big studios, and there are some in Toronto or in and around Toronto, the biggest one that we know of is Ubisoft, right? It's just around the corner from where we are. I mean that like within 10 minutes or 15-minute drive, okay? There's also Rockstar in Oakville. And there's other larger studios that are slowly starting to come into Toronto, okay? Amazon is looking to open up their gaming studio here, as well as Meta is looking to, kind of do some immersive gaming here in Toronto, right? So a lot of bigger companies are here, and we need to, one of the outcomes of this course is trying to get you to understand where you would fit in a larger kind of scenario like that. Not in an indie studio. In an indie studio, you're wearing many hats. You're probably not going to just be the lead software engineer. You're probably going to do a lot of other things too. And the reason for that is there's only like maybe 5 of you, right? Again, I'm thinking about games like Valheim and Core Keeper and a bunch of smaller games that have been out and really successful on Steam lately with Unity. And one of the biggest problems we have right now in our industry is this last thing that's way down here, which is crunch, right? Although they've been talking about fighting crunch and everything else, crunch is a really bad thing in the industry. Actually, it's driven, I believe, by our software tools as well. Let me talk about that a little bit. We have a tool that we're going to be using, or a methodology called Agile. Starting next week, we're going to be talking about project management. What Agile does is it takes a look at the burn down chart. It actually predicts if you're going to be on time with your release or not. Guess what happens? We know we're not going to be on time, so we're going to crunch, right? We're going to meet that time frame, especially when it comes to making a release closer to some kind of GameCon or a conference or something like that. And it really creates a lot of stress in the industry. We're going through a lot of change in the industry, and one of them is a potential move towards unionization, right? In a lot of sections of the industry. Why? Because people have mental health issues related to working crunch. It's a really bad thing, right? And so, larger game companies are working to try and fix this problem. And you'll see in the news things like, we have Fridays off, we have a lot of games happening, we're offering you this and we're offering you that. Why? Because they want to create a better environment. They know that there's a problem with crunch. They know there's a problem in the game industry, and they don't want a union, right? By the way, I'm either for or against unions. I think they have their place. I'm not sure if it's the right thing to introduce into the game industry, but if we look at the game industry as a whole right now, we compare it to the movie industry 50 years ago, that's what it was like. It was like the Wild West. People were getting hurt, in the movie industry, and I'm talking physically hurt, carrying equipment, working long hours, being abused, all this kind of stuff. And what happened was they got unions. They got unionized, right? And some of that has been lessened since then. So I think that that's the direction we're going in unless things get fixed, okay? Why am I talking about this negative stuff? Because it exists, right? And also, it's part of a reality of what we're going to be facing. So huge teams, right? Large games, hundreds of millions of dollars to create something, budgets as large, if not larger than movies, except maybe, Lord of the Rings, that's out now on Amazon, which is $1 billion project. That's gonna be weird. But for the most part, right, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars for these bigger games, right? And multiple years to get them out. Sometimes they don't even finish. A lot of times people have strategies like early access. Why do they have that strategy? Because they want to make the entire game, chop it into pieces, and release it over the next 2 years as a strategy. They already have the game finished. They're just going to release it slowly to you, right? And fix some of the problems. They're going to use you as a tester, right? That's what early access does. So, again, we're maturing, and the good things are we're getting better at documentation. We're getting better at structure. We're getting better at forming, good organizations out there. Like, I'll tell you, people at Ubisoft are good people here in Toronto, right? I don't know the people in France, and I don't know the people in Montreal or anybody else, but I know the people in Toronto. I've met them, I've gone there, I've got friends that work there, all that kind of stuff, and I can tell you, it's a good organization. They want, to produce good stuff. They want to be profitable too. So that is what's happening there. And so there's some people that are taking this to heart. Let's talk about some roles. Producer. It's game production, right? We're talking about game production. And the producer has a huge role, all right? The producer's role is like a project manager in other organizations, but it goes further than that, right? The producer they have a lot more pressure in many ways than just being a strict project manager. A lot of them have project management certifications like PMP from the PMI Institute, okay? The Project Management Institute. They do have those kind of things. But for the most part, it's kind of a multidisciplinary role where they have teams that are composed of different kinds of people. Imagine managing people who are arty, right? Programmers, other kinds of people who you're going to bring in, game players, gamers. Imagine a whole room of gamers, and you're trying to marshal them all together in one direction to make something. It's tough. It's really, really hard to do. We want to play. That's why we're here, right? We love to play. The idea of play is why we want to make our own games. Find their own role-playing games, a tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. Have you guys played Dungeons and Dragons, anyone?
Yeah.
Right? Is anyone not satisfied with those games and like, I want to make my own version of this game? Because Dungeons and Dragons is just not good enough, right? It's good, but I'm telling you that people do that kind of stuff. And this is the love of games that we're in right now. We're here in this industry because we want to make stuff. We look at some of the things that are out there and we say, man, I really would like this game to have fill in the blank. This thing that you wanted that just doesn't exist right now. Or it's there, but it's not quite what you wanted to play. You want this other thing that you want in there, and it's never going to happen. It doesn't matter if you like, turn-based strategy games like XCOM, or if you like, strategy games, other kind of strategy games, real-time strategy games, or if you like to play first-person shooters, or you love 2D games, whatever it is. There's always some aspect of that game that you're not satisfied with, that you want to change. Some games are awesome. I have to say, like the guys from Software have, really produced some great hits over the years, and some mediocre ones too, right? But there's some really great companies out there that we want to emulate. How do they do it? How did From Software produce things like Bloodborne and Dark Souls and Elden Ring and? They just keep on pumping out really great hits, right? And what about the people at Bethesda, the people who disappoint us when they come up with Fallout 76, right? And they come up with Fallout 4 with terrible textures and a bunch of other things. By the way, I love Fallout, the Fallout series. It's just that it's just watered down over the last little while. Just keep finding this thing, just gets worse and worse, not better and better, which is kind of weird because they're under pressure. They're under pressure to sell. They're under pressure to produce the next greatest game, right? Or even Ubisoft, the next Assassin's Creed. They want to rework Assassin's Creed now, back to the beginning. Come up with something new, guys, right? It's like the old adage when it comes to making movies, give it to me the same, only different, right? So the responsibilities of a producer are varied, and it's not just project management, but also things like connecting with different kinds of teams across the organization, right? When we think about this, the production process, how it starts with some kind of game concept, which is what I'm asking you to do. Come up with a game concept. One of the things you're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks is looking at your influences. What games do you love to play? And which one of those 3 games that you're going to make? Are you going to make some kind of side-scrolling bullet hell shooter? Are you going to make a top-down tank game? Or are you going to make a platformer? Which one of those type of games are you going to make next semester? Which one? And why? Is it because you love playing this specific type of game? What is the look and feel? What game mechanics do you want to include? What do you not want to include? What is your interface going to look like? Start thinking about the details, guys, as much as possible. And start concepting. Spitball, brainstorm. Come up with something that is a concept that you love. And then talk amongst each other. You might have some really similar interests to the people in the group that you're in. Something that you want to do, right? And also, here's something else. Make it doable, right? We don't want to make something that's impossible to make as well. Here are the things that are impossible to make, like I said. Please don't make a role-playing game. I'll say that again. Any puzzle games are really, really hard to make, really good. Like, puzzle games are hard to make, right? Any kind of motion graphics type of story games are really hard to make. They're really, really hard to make because you need art, you need a bunch of other stuff. So make it doable. Make it something that you can knock off. And make it, even if it's a smaller game, like a top-down, side-scrolling bullet hell shooter, you can make that really polished, because you're doing a couple things here. This is one of the exercises. You're trying to learn how to work together, even with a simple game like this. And you can make a really great, polished little game, learning how to work together and learning C++, the SDL engine, and a bunch of other stuff, okay? So don't push yourself to do something that's undoable. Push yourself to learn how to work together. So really the way it works with production, there are really 4 big phases, like we say here. Pre-production, which is what we're in right now, okay? Team forming, concepting, all that kind of stuff. Coming up with a game design document, wireframing each level, what is it going to look like? Think about the rules of the game. If I was going to make a board game today, right, think about your favorite board games. Do you play board games? Right? If you have a favorite board game, and I don't know, whether it's, I hate to say it, Monopoly or Risk or something else that's out there, that's been out there for 30 years, or whatever, or maybe there's some other kind of board game you like to play, right? Think about the rules of those games, or even a card game like Magic the Gathering, or some other kind of game out there, right? What are the rules of the game, and what makes it interesting? What are the conflicts? What are the things that make that game work, right? That's what you're going to do in pre-production. That's what this course is mostly about. Production is actually going to start next semester, right? We can't do production right now because there's no technical stuff. You're learning how to code. There's those kind of things, right? Some of you don't even know, where to start. So we're in pre-production. So we're in the first of 4 phases, okay? Next semester, you're going to start getting into production, and then it's going to mash into testing. Post-production is something we're not going to really touch until probably 3rd year, okay? Why? And we're not going to do it with this game, okay? Post-production is marketing, post-production is packaging, post-production is producing, deploying to something like, Steam or, I don't know, even itch.io, someplace, right? Xbox, if you're going to do a console game, or PS5, or whatever it's going to be, a Switch, or even the Steam Deck, whatever you're going to do, that is your deployment. It's post-production. How are you going to market that? Think about your audience. That stuff happens here in pre-production, right? What is your audience? Who are you making this game for? Who are you not making this game for? Is this game for kids? Okay. Well, if this game is for kids, I'll tell you, a lot of adults won't play it, right? If it's really made for kids, right? So think about your audience, right? Start thinking about those things, and it'll start forming up your game concept. Start thinking about the things you want to do and the things you don't want to do. One of the things we talk about with project management is think about the things that you're not going to do this semester, that you're not going to do in the game, right? And then you'll maybe come up with those things that are going to do, that you're going to do in the game. Okay, so those are the 4 phases. Okay. So it kind of looks like this. It's kind of like this little pyramid. It starts off at the bottom with pre-production. The pre-production phase, you're concepting, you're coming up with game requirements, you have the game plan, there's a risk assessment, And what you're going to do is you're going to move into production where you actually implement your plan, you're going to track your progress with some kind of tool, and you're going to complete all your tasks. This is where most of the coding is going to happen right here. But you're also going to test and then kind of go back and forth to do this, right? I have to tell you that there is no clear, I don't know, stop of pre-production and starting of production. There is nothing like that. It's not real, all right? This chart is nice, but the reality is pre-production bleeds into production quite often, okay? And the reason for this is because when you start coding a game, okay, so let's talk about different kinds of games we can code and different kinds of games we can make. So, lately I've been involved in a project. It's called Bloodstar Plasmagoria. Okay, that's the project. It's a science fiction role-playing game in the far future. All right, and it is pretty gory. That's where the Goria comes from, right? Plasmagoria, right? And the idea behind this is the red stars in the universe are blood stars that are living stars. They can also infect you and create undead creatures. Okay, don't ask me. It wasn't my idea. But the idea is that we want to start concepting this game. How does this work? How does this game, Bloodstar Plasmagoria, how is it going to be formed up? It's a test. We're going to start off with a tabletop role-playing game. What? It's a role-playing game. Am I going to come up with a role-playing game, write the code right away? Hell no. I want to test it to death on the tabletop, right? So if it works on the tabletop, that's my prototyping, right? I want to see that it works. I want to see that it's fun. I want to find the fun in the game, and then I want to code it, right? Prototyping is part of what we're going to be doing here in pre-production. We're going to start prototyping with Unity, and that's where the bleed happens, between pre-production and production, to see if we can validate our idea a little bit so that it's going to work. Okay. More about the production cycle. So what happens, if you notice, is you have these cycles that happen. Your first playable, then you have your alpha, then you have your beta. A lot of times what we have is many playables. Your first playable release is the first thing you're going to do next semester, which is basically going to prove out it's almost like a proof of concept. You're going to come up with something called a minimum viable product, right? Every single time you come up with a release, it's something that's a potential shippable game. Every single time, okay? And there's going to come a point where you need to test it. Nowadays, like we said, there's a lot of early release games. Why? They're going to get you to test it. You're going to buy it, you're going to spend your $20 on Steam. You're going to buy this game, you're going to check it out. It's going to be somewhat broken. I'm thinking games like Subnautica. I'm thinking games like other games that are out there right now that are all in early access, and they stay in early access for like 2-3 years. Right? Why? Why do we accept this? Why do we hook on to these games that are not even finished yet? And it's not because we just want to support the indie game developer. It's because some of these concepts are really cool, right? And they're putting it out there, and they're using you to get feedback. They're actually going out of the building, and they're using you to give them direct feedback on what you want to change. So the game becomes the game you love. That's the idea behind it. It's a good idea, but it's also a good marketing tool, right? So it's a way of selling the game before it's finished. So we're going to come up with this first playable, second playable, third playable release, a bunch of playable releases. And then we're going to come to the point where the game is in alpha state, where it's ready. We could probably put it out as an early release, okay? That's what happens. And eventually what ends up happening is between the alpha and the beta, right, we have a lot of testing happening. That's what's supposed to happen. Does it really happen? No. Cyberpunk 2077, right? No, it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen because we want to get it out there. There's so much pressure. You know, CD Projekt Red had some great games before Cyberpunk 2077. I was dying to see that game. And then when it came out, I was like, God, it's glitched, right? First day, day one gameplay for Cyberpunk 2077 was bad. It was really bad. Day two was better, and day three, and now it's not a bad game, all right? Same thing with other games like
The Sims.
The Sims, okay. No Man's Sky is what I was thinking. No Man's Sky was a broken game when it came out, right? It was promising all this kind of crazy stuff. And now, finally, after how many, 6 years? 7 years? However long it's been for No Man's Sky, it's finally a decent game if you actually play it. It's not a bad game. I'm thinking about Diablo 3 when it first came out. It was a broken game, right? It wasn't working. Day one, it was dead. It was not working. They changed it a lot. And now, they keep on adding new releases, and they have all kinds of battle passes and stuff like that still, even today with Diablo 3. I'm really concerned about Diablo 4, and I really don't like the release that they put out there lately with that really weird pay-to-play thing. But, you know, it is what it is, right? So they've come up with this. These are the phases: pre-production, some kind of production, testing, and then wrap up and release. Okay, and those iterations are going to continue to happen for us. We're not going to quite get here. We're probably going to get it to about here before we move on. All right. Notice that if we're going to do this, this is what's going to happen next semester. We're going to do some of the stuff we're doing today, this week, and this semester, and the next semester we're going to get into production and testing. Wrapping up, maybe not so much. Okay. So again, the first phase is all pre-production. It's what the game is. We're going to figure out how long it will take to make, how many people are needed. Typically in the real world, we're going to figure it out. Well, what do we need? Do I need a rigging person? Do I need someone who's going to do a 3D animator? Am I going to do mocap? Or it's actually called performance capture now in Ubisoft. They don't like calling it mocap, for whatever reason. Right, to have their own stuff. Are we going to use AI? Are we going to use some kind of LiDAR to detect people when they're walking in VR? Like, what is it that we're going to do in the game? Who do we need? What specialists do I need to employ? All right, that's what this is. How many people and how much is it going to cost? We're going to try and ballpark it. Is it going to be a truly super expensive game, or can we knock it off with the people that we have? Do we all have to quit our jobs, or can we do it part-time as indie developers? Most of the time, you can get so far as an indie developer, then you get to quit your job and finish the game, right? Some people use things like Kickstarter and other platforms like that to gather money to make their game, right? But all this kind of stuff happens in the first phase. And it says lasting about 1 week to more than a year. It's rare that I see a game completed in a week unless you're doing a game jam, okay, something like that. And then the game is kind of functional, but it's not great. And it's around what it says, 10 to 25% of total development time. And the main goal is to create this game plan. I have a game plan that I'm going to follow to reduce and deploy my concept. That's the idea, okay? And when I talk about the game plan, we want to think about all the game's features. Okay, so next week we're going to be talking about agile project management in more detail. And what I'm going to be talking about is a series of user stories, right? And a series of features. So imagine making a list of every single possible feature you can think of in the game. From the very beginning, all the things that you want for every single level that you map out ahead of time. That's the planning that we're talking about here. By the way, most likely that plan is not going to be what it's going to look like at the end. You're going to pivot a bunch of times before you're finished, right? Because you're going to try and do something that you can't do, or you're going to try and do something that just doesn't work, or you're going to try and do something that's just not fun. It doesn't make sense. It's too hard. It's too easy. It needs to be adjusted. And you're going to make these course corrections throughout the entire time. Okay? So that is your game plan. But one thing that's different between how things used to be, I'm building a house, right? I need to be super solid on what I'm doing. Remember I talked about when I'm building a house, what I want to do. I need to have a blueprint for the house, right? And I need to have all the planning ahead of time. Because if I can't just pivot when I'm making a house, right? I can't. If I'm making a house, I have to know what materials I need and everything else when I'm doing that. Guys, we're not making a house. We're making something that's been not made before, right? The stuff that we're doing is brand new. We're creating stuff, technology from nowhere. Sure, we might be emulating something that's already out there, but it's still brand new, which means there's a lot of uncertainty. And if there's uncertainty, it means that our plan is probably going to change. Okay? So that's our pre-production starting off. We have all the features. We have some constraints of what we want to do. And it'll come up with, we can kind of estimate costs and the people that we need. So again, pre-production is broken down into game concept, game requirements, and the game plan. And your risk assessments are performed at every stage. And risks are things like, okay, what are the risks if I want to make 20 levels in my game? Think about this. I plan 20 levels. What are the risks? There's a risk that it may not happen, right? Because 20 levels, wow, that's crazy. Who plans 20 levels, right? I might plan the first 4 levels or 3 levels, because I definitely want to plan a tutorialization level. That's just a standard these days. I want to be able to show the players how to play the game. Heck, they even have that in a board game. If you buy a board game today, there's going to be instructions on how to play. Do this, do this, do this. This is the order of play. If I have a combat or some kind of mini game inside of my game, there's going to be instructions on how to do that. During the combat sequence, you roll initiative, you see who hits and whoever goes first, and blah, blah, right? And that's how it goes, right? So there's got to be that. There's got to be some kind of tutorialization. And tutorialization is also part of onboarding, which is what we're going to talk about with marketing. Okay. So when it comes down to the game concept, and I crossed this out because in the book it said, would it be fun to play Cowboys and Indians? We don't talk about that anymore, and that's really terrible that they wrote that in, but that's how old this book is. This book on game production, right? And Cowboys and aliens, no problem. Cowboys and even cowboys in general, I like the cowboys. But I'm just saying, right? It's just a weird, ugly thing to say. But people start off with these kind of questions. They start off saying, what if I have this kind of thing? I wanted to look at a movie that I really like, or I have a book that I read, and I want to make a game that kind of follows the same concept. Or, I wrote this really cool story and about a knight and whatever, and she saved the prince. I don't know, some kind of other kind of thing, and I want to make a game like that, right? You come up with something, and most of those ideas are going to be throw-out ideas. I mean it, like you're going to look at it, and the team is going to go, oh, come on, that's terrible. Oof, oh, why would you even say that? Guys, I want you to be kind, I really do. And I want you to be unfettered in your ideas. When you guys concept, just put it out there. It doesn't matter how wild it is, as long as there's a proviso. It doesn't hurt anybody, it's not racist, there's no racial anything, it's not, about genderism or racism or ageism or any of those isms. Please be kind and be, kind of inclusive for the people that you're with, because at the end of the day, that is the new world we're living in. We want to kind of promote those kind of things. And so, but for the rest, just come up with crazy ideas. It's okay to come up with crazy ideas, right? And don't shoot those ideas down. You might laugh if it's some weird idea, right? Laughing is good. Laughing means that, hey, that's pretty funny, or it's silly, or whatever. Put it out there and record everything that you guys come up with, right? And go back to it and say, do we really not want to do this thing, right? For the people that are producers, try and be the facilitator when you meet with people to concept your game, right? So I know it's really hard because all of us have opinions, but for the producers that are out there, producers, put up your hand. Okay, you're producers. What I want you guys to think about, who's your producer here? Oh, there you are. All right. For producers, I want you trying to be a facilitator. What I mean by that is try not to have a bias or an opinion. Try to manage the meeting and try and get the people in the meeting to give you the ideas as much as possible. Draw it out from them and have somebody, a scribe or a recorder, to record those ideas. And then, when you're concepting, don't knock those ideas down. Some of the funniest, craziest ideas are the ones that make really great games. Or very simple ideas like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could fling a bunch of birds at pigs and it made some funny noises? Ha ha ha. Right? And then we have things like, Angry Birds. So that's the kind of stuff that happens. What I also want you to come up with is, it says it needs to define a mission statement. And a mission statement is like an elevator speech. What is my game? If someone comes up to you and says, tell me what your game is, you should be able to tell them in 30 seconds. My game is, and it has this, and it does this, and this is what's a really cool thing about it, and it's like this and this. Done. You should be able to write that down. So producers and game designers, start thinking about how to hone that statement. Define what your game is about. Remember, at the beginning when we start making our game, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're in uncertainty land. We don't know what we're making. And then we come closer and closer to certainty. It takes time. Even after you're producing and coding, you still don't know really what you're making until it's done. Okay? So everything needs to be talked about. Gameplay, controls, the genre, the story, especially the story. The question I ask a lot of young developers at the beginning is things like, why? Okay, you want to make this gangster platformer, there's one that's out there recently, Guns, something in cannoli. I played it recently. Anyone play that game? It's a really great game. Anyways, but if you play I want to make a gangster game with, I don't know, zombies and the undead. I'm like, why? Why are the gangsters fighting the undead? You know, and I know it sounds silly, but ask yourself that question: why? What is the game world? What's the narrative? Was the world hit by a meteor that caused the zombies to happen? Like, what happened here? It will help you with mechanics. It will help you with making the game. It will help you with aesthetics. It will help you with the dynamics of the game, the strategy and how to win, and all those kind of things. Ask the questions: why? Why is this happening? What is the story behind the game? Okay. Games user research is really important. And this is something that is not part of the book that I added in, and it's something that's very modern nowadays, and they do a lot of this stuff. Ubisoft employs these people to do a lot of industry research. What's out there right now, right? What's the popular games that are out there, right? What's not popular right now, right? What's working, what's not working? For example, if I'm going to make some kind of arena shooter, is that a popular game? Is sandbox crafting game, is that a popular game? That kind of thing. And what kind of elements do I want to put in there, right? What kind of market share does that, game have, right, as an example? And the other thing we want to think about is user experience. What kind of user experience do we want to have? What's the feel of the game? What is it going to feel like? What is it going to sound like? And we want to validate the concept. We want to validate it versus the industry. Is the game that we're going to make even needed or wanted, right? And we'll talk about other things in this course, like, for example, making your own market. Sometimes the market doesn't know what it wants, right? And that's where the best games come out of. The games that they keep on coming out with for us are all the franchise games. We keep on getting more Calls of Duty. We don't want those games, not really anymore, right? I mean, sure, if you're going to be a competitive person, you might want one a year is okay, right? Not twice a year, definitely not every 3 months, Magic the Gathering, right? So, we don't want those kind of things. What we want is something that's new, that's really cool, I want to explore. And one of the things we do in my little game group is we have a Discord server and we're like, hey, this is a really cool game, check it out, and it's something like mostly like an indie game that comes out, an early release or something else. So games user research is important because it does a couple things. It answers things like, does it meet something called Nelson's heuristics? We're going to talk about Nelson's heuristics, not today, but another day, about when we actually look at the game itself. And does it make sense? There's some great questions you can ask yourself. Like, for example, does the game give the user status on what's happening? Do we know what part of the game they're in? Are they progressing or not? We want to give the user a sense that things are happening. A lot of times we want to give the user a sense that they're powerful, right? I feel powerful, I feel like really great. Or I want to really press the user down and make them feel like terrible, like they're the weakest ever, and then build them up. Dark Souls, right? Maybe not, and kill them anyway, right? Afterwards, Dark Souls. So that's the kind of stuff we want to do. And all those feelings and everything else come from games user research. When we start thinking about game requirements, we think about a few things. We think about things we want to have, things we must have. Like, it's just got to be in there. This is like 100% got to be in there, and would be nice to have. Nice to haves. You got to be careful with this. It kind of produces something called project scope creep. Scope creep, all right? And scope creep can happen like this. Let's go back to that house building analogy for a second, okay? So I want to build a house, and I get my Uncle Luigi. My Uncle Luigi is a really good guy. He's a real guy, by the way. He's not like Luigi. He's Uncle Luigi. He really is a guy, right? And he comes over, he's got a high-pitched voice, and he talks to me like this. Hey, Tom, what do you want? And I say, I want to open up this wall, because I want to make my house an open concept. Okay, but Tom, and that's why he talks all the time. He's an Italian guy. And he opens up the wall. When he opens it up, we see some old electrical cabling inside the wall. And he goes, Tom, you might as well change the cabling. Right? What this is the case of the might as wells. Right? I open up a wall, I see a dirty pipe, I see some extra cables, I want to fix it. That wasn't my project, right? But I might as well fix it. Now my project has grown even bigger, right? And way bigger than I wanted to or that I could even afford. We want to avoid the case of the might-as-wells. That's the nice-to-haves, right? Nice-to-haves are something that we're going to do in our DLC, guys, okay? We're not going to do it today, right? We're going to do the must-haves and maybe some of the want-to-haves, but definitely not the nice-to-haves, okay? Not in this day and age, right? We just don't have time, and there's too much competition, right? Porter's 5 forces tell us that there's always replacements for our game. Substitutes for our type of genre, our type of game, marketing. It tells us that this is the case, right? That's why people keep games under wraps. An NDA, they don't talk about it, and then they release it as soon as they can because there's someone else going to think about the same thing, and they're going to take that market share. The first entrant into the market is most likely going to be the winner. That is typically how it is, okay? We don't want that, so we keep it under wraps. And we do keep it a low scope with our minimum viable product that we want to launch as soon as possible, okay? When we talk about milestones and deliverables here, these are older words, milestones, right? Milestones was used in something called waterfall project management, building a house. We had milestones. I want to lay the bricks or the foundation. I want to build the envelope of the house. I want to add the interior. I want to start doing the finishings, milestones, right? That's not what we do in game dev. We iterate. Okay, that's what we're doing. We iterate. We start off, it runs, it plays. I have the protagonist, the player, and the enemies, and some part of the level, and we try and make it work and make it look cool. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Make it nicer, make it nicer, make it nicer. If you talk to any artist, and there's any artist in the room, maybe this will speak to you. When you start drawing something, or whether it's something on canvas, or if you start, sculpting something out of clay, you'll notice that it's never good enough until it is, right? Keep iterating, right? Keep iterating, iterating. And that's what we do with game dev too. Okay. So we have our game plan we talked about, and this is what maybe the pre-production checklist will look like. I'll get you guys to look at that. When it comes to production, now we're into the next phase, production. Okay, so that's next semester. We start looking at things like assets. This semester, what I'm going to do with you guys is I want you guys to get as many of the graphic assets as possible this semester, right? So you don't have to do that next semester for your game. So technical artists out there, if you've signed up as a technical artist, or producers, if you have technical artists in your team that want to gather assets, this is the time to do that. Start after you concept, start thinking about where can I get my assets? Do I make them? Do I find them? Do I buy them? What do I do? Don't buy them, right? Because I don't want you guys spending any money, right? You can get a lot of free assets out there. There's tons of people who want to, make assets and just get credit nowadays, right? So, especially on sites like OpenGameArt, all right? You can get a lot of free assets that look pretty good, and they're good prototyping assets. You're going to replace these assets in the future. They're like stand-in or placeholder assets. That's what I want you to get today. Well, not today, but this semester. So, again, when it comes to production, it comes down to these three sub-phases: plan implementation, tracking your progress, and task completion. Tracking your progress, we're going to use some great tools out there. The two big tools that I recommend for us today is Trello and Jira. Those are project management tools. And we're going to talk more about that next week. Trello is the little brother of Jira. They're owned by the same company, actually. Trello is free, and it's a way of us tracking our project progress. That's what it is, right? Jira is the de facto standard in the software industry. It's free for up to 10 people to use. So guess which one I want you guys to use? Jira. If you talk to people at Ubisoft, they don't use Trello, they use Jira. If you want to get to work at Ubisoft, you want to have Jira on your interview and on your resume, all right? That's what you want to have. And in order for you to do that, you need to learn about Jira as soon as possible. That's tracking software that we're going to use to track our progress for every feature that we want in our game, okay? Task completion is about not just completing okay, so let's suppose I have my producer here and he says that we want to create some kind of properties we want to add to our game or features. and I kind of do what he asked me to do. Is it done? So if someone asks me to do something, I'm coding it, and I finish. Is my work done? What do you think? No, it's never done, because someone's got to test my code. If I make the code, I figure it's done, right? It's my code. It's perfect, right? It's not perfect. It's never perfect, ever. Someone has to validate that that's true. So we go through a validation process. Someone has to test it. We have quality assurance people that go through it. We have game players that test our game to make sure that it's working exactly as it's supposed to. And it validates against our game design, right? The game designer is going to go, yeah, it works, Tom, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. And back to the drawing board. We make another iteration, we iterate. That's task completion. Task completion is about coding and validating, and then coding again, right? Because remember, we're doing something that's uncertain, has a lot of uncertainty. When it comes to plan implementation, right, we have a plan, we want to execute on the plan. We need people for that plan, right? We talked about feature creep or scope creep. The case of the Midas was, hey Tom, this wall has this electrical cable, and fix it. No, Uncle Luigi, I can't afford it. Unfortunately. Tom, there's a fire hazard. Uncle Luigi, let the house burn, I can't afford it, right? In reality, we have to say those kind of things when it comes to coding games. And if I was going to make it in a house situation, I might say, oh, you're probably right, I don't want my house to burn down, and I have to replace my cable, right? But where this is really true in game dev is sometimes I need to create subsystems. Sometimes I need to create a game engine, right? Again, some really great words from experienced people that I've talked to is this: do not make a game engine, make a game. I know that sounds crazy, and you're like, well, of course we want to make a game. But sometimes what happens is there is just no infrastructure. It doesn't exist. You want to do something and there's no subsystem for that. You need to do some game engine work, right? In that case. And you only want to do that when you need to, okay? So implementation is, yes, we want to watch feature creep, and we also have, we want to keep our eye on task dependencies. Sometimes one task or one feature depends on another one, okay? I want to do multiplayer, okay? I can't do multiplayer unless I have single player. I need to figure out what that looks like first, right? And I can't do single player unless I have some movement. And I can't do movement unless I have a camera. And I can't do camera unless I have, and so on. And we can go back and forth like that. And we talked about tracking progress and task completion, and there's our phase. Testing is, I think it says here that it's a critical phase, and it also talks about when to test and quality assurance. Guys, we test all the time. Okay, at one point it was like we test kind of at the end of something. We don't. We test all the time. We constantly test. We have something called nightly builds that happen all the time with the game. And what we want to test that build out so it's okay. And these nightly builds, usually we put up on some kind of version control system like GitHub or Perforce. And what we do is we say, okay, let's test this build out. And the build usually has some kind of number. It's a numbered build that we have. And if you look at any of the early release games right now, they have this numbered build on the top. That's their nightly build that they're testing. And usually the nightly build can be made of like one little feature change or two or three little things when you update stuff, right? And that's what you're testing. We want to test it out with whoever the game testers are. For the most part, that's us. We test the game for the game companies these days. All right. If we do get to a beta phase, right, it's not just about fixing bugs, right, but also more than that, it's about polish. And how is the next DLC going to be plugged in? Okay, that's the reality of today. That's one of the strategies when it comes to marketing and expanding the game. Look, what we want with our games these days is for players to play that game forever. Okay, that's the reality. Minecraft. Right? How long has that lasted for? And it continues to last and morph. They keep on getting new stuff, which is amazing because I'm like, is this game ever going to die? It's never going to die. This thing is going to continue, right? And continue to morph. Whether it's Minecraft VR or whatever else they're doing, they just keep on adding more stuff, right? And I'm fine with it. I think it's a great game, right? But then there's some games that just die out, like Especially when it's like, you have number 2 and number 3 and number 4 and number 5. The number 1s and number 2s, they just die, right? They shut them down, they shut down the servers, they do all this kind of stuff, right? So, but we want a game to last forever, and the way we can do that is to continue to create content for that same game. D&D, anyone who plays D&D, some people said they played D&D 5, right here? You guys play D&D? If you've played D&D before, D&D version 5, Dungeons and Dragons, been out since the 1970s, right? I'm not going to tell you when I played it, but I played it for a long time, goddammit, okay? And what's happened with D&D is they're coming out with something called One D&D next in 2024. I'm not sure you guys have heard this, where they want to replace D&D 5 because of a lot of different reasons, and they don't want to come up with new versions of D&D. They just want to keep on adding content and small changes, right? This is a good concept, but it's also troublesome for some people who have been playing D&D for a long time. Because why? They're going to resell us all the books again, right? That's what they do. Same thing with Warhammer 40K. Who's a Warhammer 40K fan? Anybody? If you guys have played Warhammer 40K, you know that we're on the verge of finishing off 9th edition, right, and moving into 10th edition, or coming up with Marines 2.0, right, which is coming up, right? And they're going to just keep selling us more books. Why? Because they want to sell those darn miniatures. That's what they want, Warhammer 40K. And it's never going to stop. And Games Workshop has to make some money. So that's the way it works, right? And where I'm going with this is they continue to, to release them. What we don't want is to do new builds based on fixing bugs. Beta, the idea of a beta is slowly going away, is what I'm saying. And what's happening is we're just adding more content. Content. Keep on adding more content. Valheim is a good example of that, where they keep on adding more content. And so on. And same thing with Core Keeper. Testing is broken down in 2 phases, plan, validation, and code release. And we've talked about code releasing in the past. Post-production is where I want to go to right now. And this is where they do things like the marketing plan and as well as the post-mortem. What is a post-mortem? We're going to be doing the post-mortem next semester. A post-mortem means after death, right? Post-mortem. But typically what it also means is, hey, we finished our project, the project is no longer active, right? The project is now in operation. So again, if you want to think about it, project management is kind of a temporary endeavor. That's what it's defined as, where we want to build something new, and then when that thing that we've built is over, we go from this temporary project into operation. It's in operation, or in deployment, if you will, right? And then the project is over, it's done, and we move into something called post-mortem, right? Whereas we're kind of getting a feedback on how things went. Did it go well? Did it not go so well? What did we learn from this thing? Are we going to have the same team work on the next game? Hopefully, right? Or do we want to get rid of some people and get some new people in the game? What is it that we want to do? Post-mortems don't just happen at the end of a project. Nowadays, with agile project management, it happens at the end of every release, usually. Every single time we have a release, sometimes called the sprint, if we're doing Scrum, we do a sprint retrospective. And a sprint retrospective is when we get together, we say, so guys, how did it work this time around? Did we do well? Did we not do so good? What can we do better? And we try and improve the process. This is called continuous improvement. Okay, so that's your post-mortem, is what we're doing. Archiving is where we kind of archive knowledge. We don't do that as much anymore, but that's still part of it. Okay, just going to move on to the next part. So let's talk one more thing about the production cycle, which is the different roles in the team. We've already kind of talked about that, sorry for the feedback. We've already kind of talked about that with specialty roles. But think about these as different departments: production, art, engineering, design, audio, quality assurance, and corporate. And a lot of times these guys, these corporate guys over here, they really push the rest of us to do things we don't really want to do, right? Like make the next Call of Duty, right? Like make the next Assassin's Creed, right? We may not want to do that. We want to make the new Star Wars game. That's what we want to do, right? We want to come up with something brand new, right? And it's difficult for us to break in a new franchise. How many people actually watch brand new movies that have nothing behind them? It's really tough to get, for that to happen these days. most of us, unfortunately, want to really watch more of the MCU, as an example, Marvel movies that are out there these days, and see a brand new superhero movie that just came out with Sylvester Stallone. That's not so good, as an example, right? This is the kind of stuff that, we want to look at. And why? Because we like what we know. That's the reality. We like what we know. And it's really difficult. So the corporate guys know this, and they know this formula thing, which is give it to them the same, only different. I want to give you another Assassin's Creed, but now it's Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now it's Assassin's Creed this and Assassin's Creed that, and we're going to keep selling you the same thing with it's a completely different game, but the name is the same, right? And that's what happens with the corporate guys. All these departments exist in larger and even some smaller organizations. But that's something that we have to know. But again, we're talking here today about game production and the production life cycle. So when we think about production in general, from a very high level, we have different parts of our different teams, right? Different kinds of producers, right? We have the publisher producer, the developer producer, and they connect together. They connect with marketing. Producers are involved with all kinds of stuff, and it's one of the most challenging jobs out there, right? Truly. First of all, one thing to note also, don't expect that you're going to go into something like a Ubisoft and instantly become a producer or a designer or whatever. If you're going to go as a junior anything, you're going to come as a junior, you're probably going to come in as some kind of junior generalist or quality assurance. That's where you're going to come in nowadays. It doesn't matter how good you are, what degrees you have. You're going to come in pretty much low. Why? You need to know what you can do. Doesn't matter what you can do on the resume, right? Or in your little, test that we're going to give you. They want to know how reliable you are. Can you make it on time, right? Do you have the people skills to connect with other people? Can you build stuff? Do you have a vision? Do you know where you want to be? There's lots of questions. So they stick you really lower. Being a producer is hard. Okay. I'm just going to move on from this because I don't want to waste too much more of your time. But let's talk about the producer, because one of the things that you guys are going to have to do as producers here in our team in game production is you need strong leadership skills. That's true. Effective communication skills. That's true. You need to organize yourself. That's true. And what's the difference between being a leader and a manager? What's the difference? I'm going to get you guys to do that in a little presentation. Yeah. Okay. Leader looks for help. Manager just tells people what to do. Could be. Yeah. What else? Anyone else? Think about the leader. If you think about your producer, the people that stepped up today, the people that were fearless. Yeah.
I feel like leaders are more connected with the team.
Leaders are more connected with the team. Yeah. It's really, there's a lot of philosophies around it. There's a bunch of camps around this thing, right? But one thing to note is there's a lot of little skills that producers gotta have. A ton of things, and one of them is experience, right? The experience to deal with conflict. And also some certifications like, project management training with Agile, It's a difficult role. And that's why it's not just a project management role. When we look at a producer and we think about game industry, the producer is a multidisciplinary role. They have some experience, maybe even coding or doing something else. It's not just about, coming in and managing a team. Okay. This is the art department. I'll let you read that. In engineering, this is important for us. Okay. So engineering, really, when we think about this, is we have a technical director, then there's a lead software engineer, then there's an engineer, and underneath engineers, there's different kinds, like we talked about. A network engineer, a sound engineer, a graphics engineer, and so on. And these specializations are required in larger teams. Sometimes, though, in smaller teams, we wear many hats, right? I'm the network engineer, and I'm also the AI engineer, and the engine engineer, and a bunch of other stuff, because it's just me. I'm the coder, right? But in larger organizations like Ubisoft, you have these divisions more often, okay? But I want you guys to understand that it's not just, it's kind of like a cast of thousands. Ubisoft has 800 employees in Toronto, right, as an example. And when they work on a game, sometimes projects can take upwards of 100 or more people, right? when we talk to Ubisoft on faculty night, the one thing they always tell us about is, hey, you guys got teams of 10? Can you get teams of 40? Because that's more realistic. Yeah, that's how big they are, at least. Design is important. And again, they talk here about, the biggest thing is about immersive gameplay. Immersive gameplay. So why immersive gameplay? And I know we're timing out, guys, I'm going to finish off in a second. The reason why we want to be immersed in our gameplay is we want to lose ourselves in gameplay, right? We want to get into that flow state, if you will, where everything disappears, we only care about the game. We're even yelling at it, most of us. God damn it, right? Especially when there's some kind of person on the game, you know, in a multiplayer environment that is just terrible to play with, right? But the idea is we're so immersed in the game that everything else disappears. We don't care about school, unfortunately, or work, or family, or anything, or hygiene. We just play the game, right? And why is it? Why can that happen? Because it's a great game. It's something that's drawing you in, right? And it kind of sucks you into its world, into the point where, you know, you're having a great time. Whether it's just some kind of agility game, or whether it's a role-playing game that has deep story, it's something that we want to do, and it's done through design. It's done through narrative. It's done through, the eyes of a creative director and a writer. Sometimes, I'll tell you right now, Ubisoft gets professional writers, you know, from the movie industry a lot of times to write their games. Okay. Is it the right thing to do? Sometimes they come up with some great stories, and sometimes they don't. Audio engineer we talked about before. Quality assurance testing is an important part as well. And typically the team organization might look like this, where you have your producer, it connects with the leads, and a bunch of other people underneath. Okay? And if you think about this, this is the small team with a producer, kind of thing, where the producer's at the head, and they kind of manage all of those different departments. Okay? They're not the boss. There's other people that are outside of that. Okay? But here's a larger team, and what that might look like if you're looking at a hiring. So there's a producer, maybe an associate producer, and a bunch of leads and specialists inside that. Okay? All right. And I'm just going to keep going to corporate, and that's about it. Yeah, that's it. So I don't want to continue with much more, and we're kind of timing out right now, so I want to finish. So, summary, right? Production is complex. We're creating something brand new with a lot of uncertainty, a ton of uncertainty. That's what we're doing, right? Because we're making something that's maybe never been done exactly the same way before, right? And we want to move from a high level of uncertainty from the pre-production process into a level of more certainty as we get into production. That's what we're going to be doing over the next 2 semesters, this semester and next semester. Okay, here's what I want to leave you with. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, connect with your team members that are here in the room, right? Get their information before you go, and set up your meeting producers, because you need to meet with them before next week when your team contract is due. Okay? I'm going to end it off here, but please don't go before you do that. Connect with people now, and that's it for me. Guys, thank you so much. It's great to meet some of you, and I'm going to see you guys next week on Tuesday. Thank you. Thanks, guys.